Hello and welcome in today's session. Today we shall be talking about gender and environment. There has been a growing debate in recent years about gender and environment, highlighting women's role in the use and management of natural resources. There are a number of studies that show that environmental degradation is a gendered process. They show that poor people and marginal groups who depend directly on nature for their subsistence are negatively affected by environmental degradation. The focus has been a specific exploration of poor and tribal women in the Third World. In rural societies, since women are mainly responsible for providing fuel, fodder, and water for their households, lack of access to these resources increased both the time and energy spent on it, leading to their destitution. Gender and environment. Linkage has strongly featured at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. It also figures at the Conference of Women in Beijing in 1995. On the years that claim that women's relationship with environment as distinct from that of men has resulted in a spectrum of perspectives. All these perspectives therefore argue for a separate policy for women in environment and sustainable development approach. However, gender-environment relations are conceived in different ways. Majority of the perspectives project women's approach as users and managers of the environment in their everyday interactions on being special. In the West, women's role as homemakers and caregivers within the family is seen as important contributor to the eco-feminist perspective. It focuses on quality of life issues rather than subsistence issues. Awareness of healthy impact of toxic chemicals and the action that can be taken up by the citizens came to the forefront in the 1979-80 struggle put up by housewives of the Lao Canal community. Here, 900 families fought and won relocation after they discovered that their neighborhood was built next to 21,000 tons of toxic waste. The toxic waste buried has caused high incidence of cancer and morbidity in the community. Since housemakers had to bear the major brunt of caregiving, they became mobilized and organized a successful struggle. The movement quickly spread within US and Europe and led to the setting up of Superfund of USD. 1.6 billion to clean up toxic waste sites in 1980 by United States Environment Protection Agency and international efforts by the United Nations Center for Urgent Environmental Assistance. It has identified chemical hazardous waste as an area in need of urgent attention in developing countries. The Women in Environment and Development approach. An extension of women in development approach combines environmental policies with development. As users and managers, women collect fuel, wood, water, produce food, and guard genetic resources to meet their daily subsistence needs. This subsistence perspective gives them a unique knowledge about and an interest in protecting the environment. Thus, there is a complementarity in the interests of women and environment. Women in 1980s are seen as victims of environmental degradation. They were portrayed as victims not only of environmental degradation and natural disaster, but also of man-made scientific development, as their resource base for staying alive have been undermined and eroded. Finally, in the late 80s, the shift is towards looking at women as agents of change and better managers. Grassroots movements like Chipko are used as examples to substantiate this perspective. The experience of women in the developed world is like with the quality of life, and experience of women in the developing world is linked within the subsistence issues. Ecofeminism. The term ecofeminism was coined by Francois Dibon, a French writer, in 1974. The concept basically can be divided into two words, namely eco and feminism. The term eco is related to nature or environment, whereas the term feminism is related to women. Ecofeminism puts forward the idea that nature and women are significantly related to each other in terms of the similarities that they display. The fundamental feature of ecofeminism are women and nature share a special relationship. Consequently, women have an important stake in ending the domination of nature and conserving the environment. There are important connections between the domination of women and the exploitation of nature. These connections can be traced ideologically to patriarchal thought that sees nature as interior to culture. Since women are identified with nature, they are considered inferior, and men identified with culture are considered superior. Given this relation, women have a special stake in ending the domination of nature and hence their own subordination. This change can be brought about through a reconceptualization of the relations between women, men, and nature in non-hierarchical ways. Since the feminist movement and the environment movement stand for egalitarian, non-hierarchical system, they work together and develop a common perspective, theory, and practice. For ecofeminists, the domination of women and nature is embedded in ideological terms. It's based on a system of beliefs, ideas, and values, and that place women and nature hierarchically below men. Economists urge women and men to reconceptualize their relations with the and to nature in non-hierarchical ways. Ecofeminists draw connections between the oppression of women and the destruction of nature and trace both historically to the emergence of Western patriarchal sciences in the 7th century. However, the different configurations of ecofeminism differ on the nature of connections between women and nature. There are certain important similarities between women on one hand and nature on the other hand. According to ecofeminists, they believe that both women and nature possess a reproductive or a regenerative capacity. In other words, a correlation is taken into consideration between their life support system of nature and women's innate inborn life support systems. Another important similarity between nature and women is nurture that they provide. Women are largely responsible for the upbringing of children by providing them with love and care. In the same manner, nature is also responsible for providing maintenance and survival to its different components. A third important source of the similarity between nature and women lies in the exploitation of both at the hands of men. It is human beings, and especially the men, who have been responsible for the degradation and exploitation of nature or environment. They have placed nature on the interior level. Similarly, women have also been dominated and exploited by the men and are given inferior status in the society. It's this similarity between the nature and women that led to the emergence of the concept of ecofeminism. Ecofeminism predominantly has Western roots, and it emerged out of the peace, feminist, and ecological movements of 1970s and 1980s. Ecofeminism was coined by Avon, but it was further developed by Yanstra King in 1976. It became a moment in 1980 with the organization of the first ecofeminist conference. It was a movement of European women in a significant number in the initial stages. During this period, the focus was to take into consideration a spiritual relationship between women and nature or earth. In other words, the early period of ecofeminism concentrated on women's emotional connection with the nature or earth. The ecofeminists felt that the men inherently were practical, reason-dominated, and hungry for power. On the other hand, the women were characterized by an emotional nature, which was distinctly separate from that of men. It was this emotional nature inherent to women that led to the foundation of a special relationship with nature. There are certain important basics of ecofeminism. There is an important connection between the domination of women and exploitation of nature. The central insight of ecofeminism is that a historical, symbolic, and political relationship exists between the degradation of nature and women. Because women are identified with nature, women and nature have special relationship. Hence, women have an important role in ending the domination of nature and conserving the environment. Subjugation of women and nature can be understood in terms of the patriarchal ideology. According to it, nature is considered an inferior to culture. Women are identified with nature and hence are considered an inferior. On the other hand, men are identified with culture and therefore are considered as superior. Even this relation, women have special role in ending the domination of nature and hence their own subordination. This movement and the environmental movement then become correlated because both stand for egalitarian principles, non-hierarchical principles. They work together and develop a common perspective, theory, and practices, and change can be brought about in the relationship of men with both nature and women. Since women and nature are placed below men, it is necessary to bring about a change. According to ecofeminists, it is necessary for women and men to reconceptualize their relationship with one another and to nature in non-hierarchical ways. Ecofeminism represents the combination of a radical ecology movement known as the deep ecology on one hand and feminism on the other hand. It accepts the fact that have been primarily responsible for environmental degradation. Deep ecology focuses on the destructive human patterns related to nature and replace it with an affirming culture. Similarly, feminism also concentrates on eliminating the destructive human pattern related to nature and replacing them with a life-affirming culture, and also concentrates on eliminating the destructive cultural norms and practices. Norms related to women and replacing them with freedom, individualism, and democratic right for women. It is necessary to create consciousness regarding male monopolization of resources and power and replacing it with egalitarian approach. Thus, feminism and deep ecology show interconnectedness. The males are associated with aspects such as rationality, assertiveness, cultural autonomy, etc., etc. On the other hand, the females are associated with aspects such as emotions, connectedness, nature. Respectively, all these assumptions are result of a patriarchal mentality whereby the aspects associated with men are considered as superior and those associated with women are considered as inferior. The patriarchal tendency also believes that nature and women to be controlled by the males. Configuration of ecofeminism. Liberal ecofeminist argues that environmental problems are a result of the rapid exploitation of natural resources, accompanied by the lack of regulation. They propose to change human relations with nature through the passage of new laws and regulations. Radical cultural ecofeminists, on the other hand, analyze environmental problems from within a critique of patriarchy. They argue that the exploitation of women and nature is a consequence of male domination and the relationship between women and nature through the popularization of rituals centered on the mother goddess, the moon, animals, and the female reproductive system. Women and nature are seen as sources of female power to be celebrated. Socio-economic feminist looks upon nature and human nature as socially construct and rooted in an analysis of race, class, and gender. The social ecofeminist argues exploitation of women and nature is due to the structure of capitalist patriarchy. Thus, for some ecofeminists, the women-nature link is biologically given. They point to the similarities in the experiences of the women's body and that of nature that is different from women's bodily experiences. The power to reproduce links women with each other and other life forms and then gives them a different consciousness. This link is related to the idea of an essential female nature that is irreducible and unchangeable. For other ecofeminists who do not believe in biological determinism, women's essential nature is considered to be a cultural construct that is universal, based on specificities of female biology, but which cannot be reduced to it. Women's reproductive functions, the social roles, and the psychic structure that is consequently occurred all make them seem to be closer to nature. Men, on the other hand, are forced to create through cultural and technological means. This associates them with culture. The connection between women and nature is rooted in biology, although men and women also mediate between nature and culture. Since the linkage between women and nature is inevitable, these scholars foresee a mere environmentally sustainable future. For still other ecofeminists, such as Nostra King 1990 and Caroline Merchant 1980, the dichotomy between women and nature is false, patriarchal, ideological construct through which gender hierarchy is maintained. The women-nature connections are seen as ideological constructs that have come up historically in certain societies. Vandana Shiva powerfully argues that the violence against women in nature is intrinsic to the dominant patriarchal model of development that is a colonial imposition on indigenous societies in Asia and Africa. This has very often replaced traditional non-hierarchical ideas that supported more balanced relations between women, men, and their environment. Therefore, one needs to recover them, build on them, and change the nature of development. Critics of ecofeminism. There are many other problems with ecofeminist concepts and categories. It's argued that it is ethnocentric, essentialist, blind to class, ethnicity, and other distinguished cleavages, ahistorical, and neglects the material sphere. Ecofeminist literature portray the historical exploitation and domination of nature and women as going hand in hand. Both are seen as victims of development. Ecofeminist literature fails to establish the women-nature linkages through concrete evidence as strong argument. Eco-friendly management practices by women, like not cutting living trees but using dead wood and so on, are interpreted to show women as naturally caring, nurturing, and selfless with a commitment to both the future generations and the environment itself. However, the fact that deadwood is lighter and hence easier to carry is not seen as a significant reason for women not cutting living trees. Ecofeminist, which related women and nature to biology, is characterized by essentialism and romanticism. Just because women have not been in forefront of cutting trees, mining and so on, women are seen as more caring about the environment. It probably only reflects the gender division of labor and distribution of opportunity than a special relationship between women and nature. The ecofeminist images of women retain the patriarchal stereotypes of what men expect women to be, frees women merely caring and nurturing beings instead of expanding the full range of women's human potentialities and ability. By emphasizing the special relationship of women to nature, they ignore the fact that men too can develop an ethic of caring for nature. It ignores the specific context of environmental practices and overlooks the facts that the concept of nature, culture, and gender are historically and socially constructed and vary across and within cultures and time periods. A commonly held notion is that since women are more severely affected by environment degradation, they are naturally drawn towards conservation activities. However, there are examples of women being the agents of environmental degradation rather than conservation due to pressure of gender-class relations and poverty. By romanticizing the question of women's agency, the ecofeminist discourse ignores the possibility of a gap between women's interests in environmental protection and their ability to actually take action. Women may still be victims of the large processes and structures of dominance. Thus, ecofeminist has given a lot of importance to the concept of patriarchy. According to them, the domination or subjugation of nature and women is due to the anti-life tendency of the patriarchal system. Ecofeminists such as King and Vandana Shiva argue that the violence against women and nature is intrinsic to the dominant patriarchal model of development. However, this view is not supported by all the ecofeminists, as exploitation of women and nature is also due to the capitalist structure on hierarchy. Thus, the internal conflict among the ecofeminists made it difficult for them to achieve their objective to bringing about egalitarian, non-hierarchical relations between men, women, and nature. The summary of the lecture emerges as ecological degradation with its adverse class gender effects has resulted in the erosion of women's system of livelihood and knowledge on which they mostly depend. With this, today's lecture comes to its conclusion. See you in the next lecture with some another topic. Till then, goodbye and good luck.